All right. Good evening, everybody. We're going to do a Solarize Faith frequently asked questions. I'm here with Eric Foley, who is the Director of Sales, Residential Sales at Earthlight Technologies. And we have been running Solarize Faith now since May 1st. We are extending the deadline to July 31st to give more people a chance to take advantage of it. And basically, the way it works is that residential solar and battery storage is available to you for rebates through Earthlight Technologies. In addition, participating houses of worship can receive or will receive a $1,000 donation for each completed project. So I wanted to ask Eric just some frequently asked questions. So we're going to start with solar and then get into battery and then talk about financing. So the biggest question that I hear most of the time actually is, what about my roof? How new does my roof need to be, or how old does it where it becomes a problem?
Right. That's a great question. So obviously solar goes on your roof. It's a very important piece of the solar puzzle. Um, First, kind of reverse engineering, what we do is before anybody gets to go solar, your roof is going to go through a very rigorous inspection through one of our solar techs, and we do what's called a site visit. We fly a drone over your home. We actually get boots on the roof. We do shingle tests. We take measurements. Typically, what we're looking for is granular loss in the roof, right? So we're looking for worn down shingles, brittle, cracked shingles. We look for how many layers there are. Typically, best case scenario, one layer. 2 layers is okay. 3 layers is out of the question. We actually do not install on 3-tab shingles, so they have to be architectural shingles. We can install on metal roofs and some metal roofs, depending on. But when it comes to age, it's a bit of, it just depends on the condition of your roof. We've seen roofs that are 10 years old and they look like they're brand new. We've seen roofs that are 10 years old that look like they're 30 years old. And that's going to really depend on how much sun exposure you have, how much shade, if there's lichen and moss growing on your roof, if there's moisture, right? So typically what we tell people is 18 years is probably the cutoff. 15 to let's say 15 to 18 years, right? That's when you're going to want to really start thinking about, should I get a new roof when I go solar? Okay, because new solar, new roof is the best case scenario. We typically, nowadays, shingles that get put on the home, they could be 50-year shingles, 100-year shingles. So it's not really so much the number and age. It really does come down to the condition of the roof. Again, if you live in an area where you don't have a lot of shade, your roof will be nice and dry. You probably won't have any lichen, but you could have cracking because your shingles could be dried out from getting baked in the sun all day, right?
Hmm.
And it could be the opposite. So it really does come down to the inspection. And again, we've seen some roofs that, I can recall a roof that we had a customer that had a 6-year-old roof, and they actually were failed because there was a soft spot in the roof. Come to find out, a lot of the decking was molded, rotted, so we had to replace the whole roof. And then again, like we've been on roofs that are 15, 18, 20 years old and look like they're in great shape. So it really
Oh,
does
wow.
depend. Yeah, it really does depend on the actual roof itself. But typically 15, 18 years is when you have that thought process of, maybe I should get a new roof if I'm going to go solar. But now again, if you re-roofed 5 years ago with 100-year-old shingles, warranty for 100 years, your roof is probably going to look better than some that were installed 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm. And what do you find? What impact, if any, does solar have on a roof? So, say I replace my roof and I get solar. What impact will solar have on that?
Right. So it's actually a positive impact. So with new technology, the fittings actually go on top of the shingles, where they used to, the old way to do it was they would lift the shingles up and put flashing underneath and then close the shingles back down. What that did is it broke the original tar seal. and then you'd have to reseal it and screw the lag bolts in, and then you'd have your fitting to connect your panels to. Now what they do is don't touch the shingles. We actually put the footing right on top of the shingle. And then we go through that footing into the rafter so it's secure. And what it actually does is it actually increases the sealing integrity of the shingles because you're actually compacting it instead of trying to break the seal and recompact it. Now, when you have your panels up there, put it to you like this. I always tell this story. My wife and I had our master bedroom upstairs. When we moved in the house, we got a new rug. We put the new rug down. We put our big king size bed right on top of the rug. After about 10 years, our kids were old enough to move, for us to move downstairs. When we moved the bed, the rug underneath the bed was brand new, like it was just installed yesterday. Now, around it, obviously, it looked like it had been walked on. So when you go solar, the panels do the same thing to your roof. Wherever your roof is, wherever the panels are, sorry, it's actually going to protect your roof from the UV rays. So
Hmm.
it's going to actually prolong the life of your roof because what really damages shingles the most is UV rays in the sun. And that sun will be hitting your panels instead.
Oh, that's awesome. And making energy. Got it. And so
Yeah.
you touched on something real quick, which sounds like this new method of solar installation prevents leaking, where that
Yes.
might have been a problem 15 years ago.
Correct.
Now it's
Yep.
actually prevented.
Yeah, so the way we do it is we put that footing right on top of the shingle. And the footing is actually designed where it has all the sealant inside where the lag bolt goes. So when you go down into your rafter, it actually takes that sealant down into the rafter with it. So the whole entire piece becomes watertight.
Oh, well, that's great. That's awesome. All right, that's
Yeah.
terrific. And how does Earthlight Technology size a solar project or a battery project?
Yeah. So a solar project is really, it's going to be very unique to each home. Each home is different because each family or each home uses a different amount of energy. So really it's an equation where we look at your electric bill. On your electric bill, you can see your prior 12 months of usage. So we add that up. We're going to ask you questions. Obviously, are there any variables, that went into the usage in the last 12 years? Did you have extra family members that were living here? Was it just the four of you, and it's been the four of you for this full 12 months? And then we ask you about the future. Are you going to add a electric vehicle, or are you adding mini splits, or are you putting in a hot tub or a pool? So we're going to factor those things in. And then what we do is we add up the kilowatt hours that you've already used, and we take that as an average for your annual usage. If you are going to add a car, an EV, or a hot tub, we can actually allocate extra kilowatt hours for the usage of those items. And then we're going to take the size of your roof. Of course, it's taken into consideration the orientation and the azimuth as far as which way it's facing and how much sun it's actually going to get, how many sun hours it's going to receive. Is it partially shaded? Is it, in full sun? Then we're going to design the system. And when we do a preliminary design, it's actually going to tell us, relatively and approximate how many kilowatt hours we can produce off of that system on that roof. And then we'll match it up with what we use. In a lot of cases, we can get you most, if not all, of your power. But the average in Connecticut, because we have big oak trees and big maple trees and 45-degree roof pitches, on the average, you're probably going to get somewhere between 60 and 70% of your power. But some people are lucky and they get 100%.
That's awesome. That's great. And so let's say, yeah, that's awesome. Let's talk about batteries. So, because I mean, most people have pretty good idea how solar works, but battery storage is new-ish to Connecticut. How does it work for a house?
Yeah, so batteries are similar to a generator, right? There are some differences, obviously, but the concept of backing up your home in a power outage is the same, right? Generators work off of fossil fuels. Okay. There's a particular size. You can get an 18 kilowatt generator, a 30 kilowatt generator. Same thing with batteries. The difference with batteries is they're connected to your solar system. Okay. So with a generator, you have the standard generator, you have to have propane tanks or a gas line connected to be able to power that generator when your power goes down. With batteries, you can attach batteries to the solar system. They can go in your garage, they can go outside of your house. And what happens is, as the sun is hitting those panels, that excess energy is going into the batteries and filling your batteries up, right, to capacity. So now, if you've got a bright sunny day, your batteries are full. Let's say a thunderstorm rolls in that night, your power goes out, batteries automatically kick on. Now your home is running off of battery power. Okay. There's a lot to do with as far as like circuits, and you can back up so many circuits. Depending on what you use, will depend on how many batteries you need. It's also dependent on the system size. It could get pretty complex if you wanted to, but really to keep it as simple as possible, you know, if you have a big enough system, most people will have two batteries, and that really means an 8 kW or larger. You'll have two batteries will typically back up your home. Depending on how many circuits you're going to back up and what those circuits are, you can get anywhere from 2 to 3 days off of a full charge. And then, of course, that's if the sun doesn't come out, right? So if the sun comes out, let's say overnight you have that thunderstorm and you deplete your batteries by 60%, right? But then the next day, the power's still out because that thunderstorm took down the transformer down the street. However, the sun's out now, your solar system is making electricity, and that electricity is going back into your battery. Now the battery is what.
All right, that's awesome. And so, just out of curiosity, do you have to have solar? I mean, I know we're talking about like adding batteries, with the first solar project, or if you already have solar, you can add a battery to it. Do you have to have solar to have a battery on your house?
So it's ideal to have solar for your battery. Now you could have a standalone battery without solar, but the way that works is now, how does your battery get powered or charged, recharged? From the
The,
grid,
the
right?
grid, yeah.
So you can fuel your battery, recharge your battery from the grid, and have that battery sitting there on your house. If the grid goes down, you can now use your battery. But if the grid is still down and your battery then gets depleted,
You're
there's
done.
no way to recharge it, right?
Right.
So in theory, yes, you can do that. Actually, somebody in our executive team actually has a battery with solar, sort of a test, if you will, and
Uh-huh.
it does work for it. But again, he has to wait for the power to turn back on to recharge the battery. So it's not as ideal or as nearly as efficient as having solar.
Right.
I will say though, in contrast, if you want your solar to work in a power outage, you actually have to have a battery, right? So if you just have solar and
Yes.
the power goes out, your solar stops working. Okay. Sometimes people think, oh, I can go solar. If the power goes out, I'll still be making energy. That's not really the case because with solar, there's an automatic flow for a backfeed that goes back to the grid, right? So your solar system, in most cases, is going to make more power than you need in the moment, right?
Hmm.
But where does all that excess power go? It goes back out to the grid. Well, if the grid is down, you can't send power out to the grid. You have workers on the lines, it would be a disaster. It'd be very dangerous, right? So what happens is when power goes out and you don't have a battery, the solar system automatically shuts down.
Right. That has been that's my experience. But with a battery, your solar is continuing to charge your battery, so you can stay
Correct. So
stay
yeah, your
online
battery,
essentially.
yeah, your batteries become your own grid, if you will.
Right. Right. And through Solarize Faith, Earthlight Technologies is offering $1,000 rebate for homeowners when they install solar, and another 500 for battery projects. Those rebates are mailed to you after the installation. of the projects. And in addition, we've got 13 houses of worship that are promoting this to their congregations. Those houses of worship will receive a $1,000 donation from Earthlight Technologies for each completed project. Uh, Once that project is installed. So I've got, folks like Trinity Episcopal Church in Brantford, Asylum Hill Congregational Church. If there are projects that come through, a participating house of worship, they will get that house of worship will get a donation, which is awesome. Um, so beyond the rebates, how do people finance these solar battery projects?
Great question. So there are a few different ways, right? So there's an ownership product, and then there's what we call a power purchase agreement, which is a third party owned. Most people will refer to it as a type of a lease, right? So with ownership, obviously, there's a couple different ways. There's ownership where you can go and you can fund the system on your own. Some people use home equity loans, some people use 401ks, some people just have cash on hand. You can buy it through ownership cash any way you want. That's really up to you. We offer solar loans. The solar loans are very similar to any other loan in the fact that you choose an APR that makes sense for you and a loan term that makes sense for you. And then we go through with the installation and you eventually own the system once the loan is paid off. Okay. And then, of course, there's the third party, which is the PPA, power purchase agreement or lease. And what that is essentially you're not buying the system. We're putting the system on your home, and you're actually buying the power that comes off of that system at a lower reduced rate. And that rate is typically fixed, and it'll be much lower than what you're paying through the utility company. Most people, it depends on, again, the situation in your home. I would say that most people see solar in general, no matter how you go solar, as a hedge on inflation, right? So whether you're purchasing it outright or going with a loan or you're going with a PPA, where you don't have any money out of pocket to actually invest into solar, there is a solar payment that you make that is predicated on the amount of power that comes off of that system. But that is probably one of the paths of least resistance for solar. So, there's no down payment for like a deposit or anything like that. Simply what you are doing is you're agreeing to put solar on your home and you're agreeing to a fixed price that will save you money immediately in the very first month that you turn the system on. That system tends to be fairly attractive with people because the warranties are all covered. There's production guarantees, and the system is also insured and repaired. And the repairs and maintenance is all covered by Earthling.
Oh, that's awesome. And the solar loans, are those through the Connecticut Green Bank or is that different?
So we have our own in-house loan partners, but there are loans out there, green efficiency loans that you can go with, and such as Connecticut Green Bank. They do offer some very competitive interest rates and programs for energy efficiency upgrades.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I guess I didn't realize you had your own in-house loan partners. That's good to
Yeah.
know.
So we don't finance the loans
Right.
ourselves, but we have partners that we work with. Yep.
Gotcha. And so PPAs are available for solar. Are they also available for battery storage?
So at the moment, not yet is what I can
Okay.
tell you. We will be offering them very shortly. And typically, what happens there is you can actually bundle solar and the battery together for a lower monthly payment.
Gotcha. Okay. And so we have a website. Earthlight Technologies has a Solarize Faith website where people can go to sign up for the first step of consultation. And once you sign up, you put in your name, your address, and there's the little menu where you can select the house of worship where you want your donation to go. If you don't actually have a house of worship, you can always select I or EJN. We will gladly receive a donation. But once people sign up for that consultation, Eric, what can they expect from Earthlight? Like, what's the next thing that happens?
Right. So once you sign up, typically you'll fill out the form, and then one of our customer experience reps, either Chrissy or Savannah, will call, and they'll show up some details that they need. Typically, they'll ask for your electric bill, which is very important for us to design the system properly. It also saves some time during the consultation as well. They will ask a few clarifying questions about the home, make sure that obviously the home qualifies for solar just based on the visual aspect of, does the house look like it gets enough sun, right? Sometimes you pull up a house in Google Maps and it looks like it's surrounded by trees. You can't even see the roof, right? So probably not a good idea for solar, but that's the first eye test. And then what they'll do from there is they will schedule a solar energy consultant to come out to your home. And that's where they will ask you a bunch of discovery questions to find out what your motivations are, what the right financial product is that you're looking for. Typically, what we do is we want to lead with an education first approach. We want to make sure you fully understand what involves going solar. We want to make sure that you understand how much energy you're going to get from it. We want to also make sure you understand the amount of savings you're going to get from it, because that's also very important, not just for the short term, but also for the long term. So the consultant will talk to you about the programs, if there's any available programs such as Grid Edge or LMI, stress communities. There's a lot of different little programs in the state that could actually increase the amount of savings that you get, especially with batteries. So there's incentives for those. And then they'll show you the options. And based on, the answers to the questions and based on what your motivations are, they will make a recommendation for the right product for you and your home and your family.
That's awesome. And so, can you actually just talk a little bit about those incentives? You just mentioned the Grid Edge incentive.
Yeah.
I know there are battery storage. There are no more. Are there any incentives for solar?
So right now, there are technically there are no blanket state incentives, okay, for solar. There are income-based incentives that you can get. There are distressed communities incentives that you can get. So if your community is labeled distressed, then you may be able to qualify for a different benefit that will reduce your payment even more. Same thing with LMI. If you qualify for LMI, which is low to moderate income, you could also qualify for added benefits that will reduce your payments as well. And then when it comes to Grid Edge, typically we see really big incentives with Grid Edge. Grid Edge basically is a map that UI and Eversource has that states, I guess what I would call it, the hard to reach places in the state. And it's not always the hard to reach places, but essentially you'll see neighborhoods on the map. And typically these are neighborhoods that lose power often, right? Sometimes they could be hard to reach. Other times Eversource probably just says, hey, you lose power a lot. We can't afford to go out and see you every time you lose power. So what we're going to do is we're going to add incentives, financial incentives for you to get a battery
Mm.
because you live in an area that loses power, right? So typically you can see an additional 20 or 30% off of your battery if you're on the Grid Edge map. That's something that our customer experience team will also help you identify. We'll identify that for you because that's one of the things that they do. And then if you are Grid Edge, then our solar energy consultant will talk to you about what those benefits are. Typically, what we find is that people that are on Grid Edge usually will get batteries because the investment is drastically reduced to purchase the batteries because of those added incentives. There's also an incentive with the battery where Eversource and UI actually use the energy out of your battery,
Hmm.
and they actually pay you for that as well. So
Oh, that was my next question. And actually, just before we get to the performance incentive, this, like, say, the incentives for the batteries, are those priced into the contracts, or do you get that later from the utilities?
So yeah, so that's actually priced in. So you'll know exactly what you have with you'll know exactly what your net cost is if you're Grid Edge with.
Okay. Okay. And so to talk about the performance incentive, because this is a really interesting
Yeah.
aspect.
So the performance-based incentive for your battery is going to be paid out in the sense where Eversource, the utility company or UI, is going to actually use the power out of your battery, what they call these active events, right? So brownouts, things like that, scheduled events where Eversource or the utility company knows that they're going to need more power. So they actually use the power out of your battery, you get incentivized and actually reimbursed, or I should say paid, to allow them to use the battery. So typically, in most cases, that incentive will pay for probably roughly 30 to 40% of the battery cost up front, which is nice. Or in
And,
it, well,
and generally,
say
we're
up
talking
front.
about, sorry.
It's you. Yeah, no, I didn't want to misspeak. I misspoke. It's not upfront, so it's actually allocated over 10 years. So
Mm-hmm.
every
Mm.
year you're going to get a certain amount of incentive money for allowing them to use the battery power. You could actually turn it on or turn it off. You could reduce the amount of power that they use. You can control it. Most people say, "Well, are they going to take my battery power when there's a storm coming?" No. So if they know that there's an impending storm, they don't touch your battery power. They make sure they leave it for you.
So yeah, and so this is my understanding has been this is generally just used during times of extreme heat and extreme cold when they need more power for the grid to keep people either cool or warm. And
Correct.
without being able to draw from people's batteries, the utilities are forced to go to what are known as peaker plants, which are the more expensive, dirtier fossil fuel plants to purchase this excess power. So the battery storage option allows them to draw, especially if your batteries are powered by solar, clean energy back to the grid, which reduces peak demand and then also by extension rates for all the ratepayers.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point because Massachusetts is a little farther ahead of us in adopting off-peak and on-peak usage charges. So we know it's coming in Massachusetts. There is definitely talk that it is going to come to Connecticut. It's just a matter of time. And what that means is during on-peak hours, if you don't have solar, if you don't have battery, you're going to be charged a much higher premium than you will in the off peak. So let's say 3 p.m. to 8 p.m., you could be paying 55 cents a kilowatt hour. But
Mm,
then 8 p.m. to 3 p.m., you might be paying 20 cents. So
hmm
the way batteries will benefit from that is you'll be able to turn your batteries on during peak hours so that you're using that solar power. And then once your peak hours or your on-peak charges are over, then you can go back to using the grid. So you'll actually be able to get a fair return on your investment with the battery once that happens. It is coming. It's just a matter of time. We don't know exactly when, but we know
hmm
Massachusetts is already installing smart collars on their meters, and it's just a matter of time for them, which means it'll just be a matter of time for us.
Right, right. Yep. Connecticut always tends to be a little bit behind Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Um, and great. So then I guess just to sort of tell us a little bit about Earthlight Technologies, because I probably should have started with that, but iRegen, I mean, we work with a lot of wonderful energy efficiency contractors. I refer a lot of houses of worship for commercial solar projects. And we've worked with Earthlight Technologies for a couple of years now on different sort of educational offerings through our webinars and whatnot. So tell us about Earthlight Technologies.
Yep. Yeah. So we are out of Ellington, Connecticut. We also have an office in Northampton, Mass. And then we also have a branch out in Oregon, on the other side of the world, if you will. So we have been in business for, I believe it's roughly 18 years in total now. And we are a full service solar company. We do, or I should say, solar and energy company. So we have residential solar, we have commercial solar. We also do commercial EV installs. We do sports lighting, efficiency lighting, and we just added roofing now to our portfolio. So we have a very diverse portfolio for what we offer. We design in house. We use in-house installers. We're very proud to say that we have 160 employees, and we do everything under one roof. We do have a few partners that we do subcontract work with when it is out of the scope of normal solar. But mainly everything that we do, install panels, everything comes from our warehouse, which again, it's hard to find these days because a lot of companies out there will just subcontract everything, and you might be dealing with a sales organization that has 15 different partners that does everything. We have all our own electricians. We have all our own installers, our own roofers. So mainly for this program, this taps into our residential department and our residential solar. Typically, we are best known for the quality of our installs. We're very proud of our Google reviews. I always tell people, hey, don't judge us on our good Google reviews. Judge us on our bad ones. Good luck finding them, right? If I can, brag a little bit, right? So we're actually very proud of that. We take a lot of pride in that. We take a lot of pride in quality. One of our core values is we demand quality. We demand quality from everyone in the company. So I think it really shows in the job that we do and the expectations that we always set for our own selves to make sure we can exceed for the customer. But we're, again, one of the biggest, probably the biggest local company in Connecticut as far as residential solar. And like I said, we are a full custom design company. So, we do ground mounts, we do rooftop and ground mount, we do battery installs. We can do just about anything. We do a lot of custom jobs. So even if somebody says, oh, I've been told I can't go solar by this one company, come to Earthlight. We might be able to help you as well. Obviously, there are some physical things that you can't change about your own. But if there's a will, there's a way, and we'll do everything we can to do right by the customers.
That's awesome. That's great. And so you feel, I know we've talked about this, but you feel good about Earthlight, even in the sort of changing federal landscape and the current sort of economic stress that people might be feeling. You feel Earthlight is in a really good position to weather that.
Yes. One of the biggest things in this industry is, not having too many eggs in one basket, right? There's a lot of solar companies out there right now that are unfortunately having tough times because they only do residential solar or they only do it one way, right? There's a lot of companies out there that just do the PPA, the power purchase agreement, right? There's a lot of companies out there that just do ownership, right? So we actually do a little bit of everything. We do ownership, we do the PPA, and then along with all the other departments, it really helps lift the company up, right? So we don't have all our eggs in the residential basket. So even though right now the market sentiment is a little uncertain, we can weather those storms because we have commercial solar and we have commercial EV. And where in other times and in other years where residential was carrying a lot of the weight because residential was booming and commercial was just kind of getting on its feet, but it's okay because the company as a whole is very financially healthy. So we are definitely poised, to get through any adversity, if you will, in the industry and any changes because there are a lot of changes in this industry, whether they're policy or product or process. But that's part of this business. It's always been changing. It is changing, and it probably always will be changing. But yeah, Earthlight is definitely here for the long haul, and we'll be able to, pretty much take anything the industry throws at us.
That's awesome. Great. Thank you so much. All right. So anything that I didn't ask that you think people should know?
Well, I would tell you this. Um, a lot of people will ask, when should I go solar? Right? Or, hey, the technology is going to be better in 5 years. We hear that a lot, right? What happens if the technology changes? Um, what we usually tell people is we're offering the best right now, and that is what's available. If you buy the best right now, that is going to be good for the next 20 years, right? There's not a ton of technological change in solar. Most of the time, it's aesthetics or efficiency. There hasn't really been any monumental technology changes. So the sun comes out, it hits the panels, it turns energy, DC current into an AC current, and you use it, right? In its simplest form. So when people say, when's the best time to go solar? I always tell them yesterday was the best time to go solar. That was the last best time. Today is the next best time. And then tomorrow will be the next best time after that. Because really what's happening is you're locking in rates in today's financial climate. You're hedging against inflation with today's rates. And we know with a 20-year history, utility rates go up 3, 5, 8% a year. And if you don't go solar now, in 5 years, you'll look back and say, I can't believe we're paying 45 cents a kilowatt hour. We should have went solar back when it was 20 cents a kilowatt hour, right? I always tell the story. I signed somebody up when my first customer I ever signed up was in 2017. I believe it was a 13-cent fixed rate that they got. Right now, as of last year, people are paying 30 cents. So in call it 8.5 years, the rate has gone up almost 17 cents. It's more than double, right? So what's the rate going to be in another 8 or 9 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
You'll be wishing you signed up for the 2026 rate in 8 or 9 years.
Right. 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 Understood. Yeah. All right. Terrific. So, folks, we have it. I will include when I post this, I'll include the sign up link to sign up for a consultation slash site assessment. Solarize Faith. Thank you so much, Eric, for joining me.
Yeah, thank you. We'd love to help, and any way possible, give us a call, and Chrissy and Savannah will get you all set up. If you have any other questions, Terry, feel free to share my email, and they can email me directly if they have any questions. Like I said, we'll be more than happy to help.
Nice. Awesome. Great. All right. Terrific. I'm gonna